everybody. This is Nia, founder and editor-in-chief of SheAttack.com. Today I am chatting with Witchbeam, makers of the amazing title Assault Android Cactus, which is currently available to demo and play on Steam. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into it with the questions. How did you guys decide that you were going to, be indie and do your thing?
You want to handle this one, Tim?
Yeah. Just thinking that's the best way to describe it. Well, actually, no, I think you've got the better...
All right. We'll just swap back and forth and answer the question over a really long time. It'll be fine. So basically, around February of this year, or a little bit earlier than that, me and Tim started talking about like the games industry, because we've been in the industry for a while. Tim's been making games for about 8 or 9 years. I've been doing it for about 5. And after a while, we kind of had decided that the things that we were doing weren't really what we got into the industry to do, the type of games we were making and the way we were making them, and repeatedly the kind of studios we were working for firing half the staff and closing down after they made a bad game.
Right.
So we started talking with each other about, what would we do in an ideal scenario? What type of game would we make? How would we make it? And when you start talking like that, after a month or two, it gets in your head. And I think basically we just eventually came to the point where we said, well, if we've been talking about this and we've been thinking about this, and we want to do it, there's no better time than now to actually do it, because the indie scene was really starting to boom.
Most definitely.
People are interested, and if we do it now, we're still relatively kind of young and had some savings. So if we did it and it didn't work out, we could try and do something else. But you have to try. If you don't try, you failed by default.
Right.
I've been trying to make games ever since ever since forever, really, and I've been fairly kind of open-minded about how to approach that. I've worked at larger companies. I've tried to I've worked with other people working on smaller projects, and it's I think near the beginning of the year there was this kind of almost perfect storm where tools like Unity had become sufficiently developed enough to allow small teams to tackle like larger than normal projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd met Nart and found that he was very much on the same wavelength, and actually felt like, okay, I've got someone I can trust here to kind of someone I can work with, because it's scary working on a project by myself. There's the idea that I'll just kind of go off the rails. Without someone else to kind of balance the load and help coordinate things, it's difficult to imagine. And so they both lined up, and it just seemed like a really good time to actually take the leap.
Right.
And try something on our own.
So it's my understanding that you guys used to work with Sega, right?
Yeah.
That was about
my next question
2 or 3 years.
I'm sorry?
I was just saying, we worked together at Sega for about 2 or 3 years. We actually, Tim quit working there before I did last year, and Jeff, who is not in on the conversation, who's our resident musician and additional partner on the game, he worked with us at Sega for a couple of years as well, and both of them Tim and Jeff quit Sega at various points before we reunited for this project.
So my next question would be...
Just to clarify on that, I actually am not technically part of the Witchbeam development team.
I know that.
But I did actually still end up working with Sega and consulting with them for a long time, even before Sonatin worked there. So we still sort of have this Sega connection.
Sham is an unofficial 4th member of the team because
he's awesome.
He's our guy, our social media marketing guy and contact. And
I'm the guy that makes the developers sweat. They're always wondering what I'm going to say.
Yeah, you never know.
I definitely see that. Oh my gosh. We're not going to talk about like my obsession with watching your tweets on Twitter, but with that being said, my next question to you guys would be, is it more lucrative to be an indie developer than working with a larger company like Sega?
Well, let's see. While I was working at Sega, I was being paid a wage. I had health insurance and other kinds of benefits and things like that, and I was making a pretty decent living. I could afford to live in the city center and go out a little bit and buy whatever games I wanted. Since I've been an indie developer, I've basically lived like I was a student, so I don't think it's that lucrative. In fact, I just ran out of money like the last month, but thankfully we launched our game on early access, so I can keep living.
I would definitely say working for a large company is a lot more stable and a lot more predictable. I spent a number of years working for companies, and was very. It wasn't like, I wouldn't say it was the big bucks, but I was I was comfortable. I could live a nice lifestyle.
Right.
Going indie has been very, I guess, slightly scary. But the thing for me was I realized that I was, above all, comfortable in the role. I wasn't making the kind of projects that I wanted to make, and it was starting to bother me because I was putting, it's a bit of a cliche, but the best years of my life into these games, which either didn't come out at all or came out in a kind of damaged form, and it was really starting to kind of wear on me and made me really think about, why was I even doing this? I started thinking, if I'm saving money to one day chase my dreams, why aren't I chasing my dreams now? Why aren't I willing to just dive into it?
Right.
Yeah, and I will say this about the major studios as well. Like, while they do pay reasonably well, like I wouldn't say they're paying higher than any other kind of competing industries that require the skills that you need for game development. While they pay reasonably well, you are expected to work a lot of hours, and there's no opportunity for you to do a lot better, even if the game you make is really good. You kind of like, you just, I don't think you get into games to make money, even if you're working at a big studio. You're basically making games because you want to make games, and you'll deal with the fact that you won't get quite as much as anything else you could do with your time. That's the awesomest thing about Cactus, though, is at the end of the day, whether or not it's financially successful, it's the game that I wanted to make and represents me. So, even at the end of a big project at a studio, I might have worked for a year and made a bunch of money in my salary, but the thing that I've developed, that I put out there, most of the time was something that was a bunch of compromises and like decisions that we had no power over, or it wasn't the game that I would want people to play. But this is, like, everything that goes into this game is what we decide is appropriate or interesting, or what we want people to experience, which is the best.
Yeah, and from the beginning, I've always, everywhere I've worked, I've always put everything I could into my work. I've worked very long hours. I've sacrificed quite a lot. But a lot of the time, because you're in a larger team, the end result is always, as Nat says, a compromise or a collection of limitations.
Right.
And the thing with Cactus, the thing that I'm most excited about, is that, what we put out there is what we can do. If at the end of the day it's not good enough, that was because I couldn't make it good enough. And I'd rather take that risk and that weight than continue working under this other structure where someone above me pulled the rug out from under me. It's just...
Well, I'm going to go on to my next question now. What was the inspiration behind Cactus?
I mean, I think tonally the big inspiration was that very, it's that, we often talk about being Dreamcast era, the kind of blue skies, bright graphics, large, interesting characters. That kind of arcade culture, it's big, it's explosive, the characters are kind of interesting and likable. They're not, not supposed to be so much gritty and hard-boiled. A lot of those kind of inspirations from the kind of anime and Japanese video games of that era, where you've got the big interesting characters which people remember and want posters of, and that kind of thing. That's I guess where the tone of the game largely comes from, because that was obviously my favorite era of gaming. And mechanically, it's just the stuff that's really appealed to me. A lot of the top-down shooters, a lot of the twin stick stuff, the Geometry Wars and Superstar. That's that kind of those kind of games. The really action-focused ones that are tight and really well balanced. Sorry, that was about it. Yep.
I was going to say, it's probably kind of an arrogant thing to say, but to me, a lot of it is in just the feel of the game. Like when you play a good arcade or a kind of a mechanically focused game like Geometry Wars or Super Stardust, which are twin stick shooter examples, but there's a lot of examples in other genres as well, Daytona Racing and all these kind of arcade games where it's very mechanical. the feel of the game is always really nice. Things respond precisely. It's really smooth. You move around and you never feel like you're incapable of doing what you want because the game is clunky. It's always because you need to be better. And that's something that I think is kind of tonally had a lot of impact on Cactus, where even really early on, we had way less enemy types and less of the bullet hell elements, less of the dynamic level elements, even when it was just static levels with 2 or 3 enemy types in there, and the boss wasn't even operational yet. And we would look at it, we play it, and we go, this feels really good. I think we have like something here that we can make a really great game out of, because it felt that nice kind of responsive, smooth, rewarding feeling when you moved your character around, when you shot your weapons, when you defeated the enemies. And from there we just kind of building out a lot more complex concepts and ways to use that nice feeling gameplay in an interesting way, which is where bullet hell, crazy bosses, tons of enemy types, dynamic levels, all that kind of came in afterwards.
As the founder of a female-run website, I have to ask, why an all-female cast?
I'll handle this one real quick, as just before you get into the details. So I think the guy on the Steam forums said it best when he said it's the most sexist game ever, and that's why.
Yeah, so the Cactus as a character predates the game. I had her kicking around as a character design, and that she kind of follows the more of the, I suppose, the kind of anime conventions of having this, smaller, powerful, feisty kind of character. But as we started building out the game, there was and realized that it was going to have a multiplayer focus, and we wanted to add expand the cast. Part of it was wanting to keep the way the character moved consistent, so it was like it made sense to add another female character instead of try to branch out to another rig. But as we kind of expanded the roster, I kind of got this feeling that I wanted the game to showcase Cactus. It was Cactus's game. She was the lead in the game. And I had this kind of worrying feeling based on the way that things had gone, that you could easily sort of overshadow things if you started kind of diversifying if you added the male character, what if 90% of the people that played the game would then gravitate towards them instead?
Right.
And it would detract from what I thought was important about the character. And it started making more sense to just keep them as a team of team of girls that would fight against the thing, and it just kind of grew out from that. And it's funny, like Nat said, the more we got people complaining about that, the more we felt comfortable with the decision.
Because if you're stirring up some controversy, then obviously you're doing something right.
Well, the weirdest thing was we didn't even intend to stir up any controversy. To us, it wasn't like a statement on the character being a woman or the other characters being women. It could just as easily have been an all-male cast if we had an interesting male character, or a set of interesting male characters. And the next game could just as easily be an all-male cast. It's like we try not to make it a thing that when you're designing the game you think about making sure that your cast is all one sex or another, or that you have a good mix. You try and find interesting characters, but make sure you're not precluding women characters just because that's what the norm in the games industry is.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of, there was kind of some fortuitousness about the original decision, but when we started getting a little bit of, I suppose, reaction to it, it started kind of bothering me, and thinking more about games in general, the way that it's considered an unacceptable position, or it's considered a position that needs to be challenged. That why not? Why can't you have an all-female playable cast? Like, why is that wrong? There's plenty of games which do the alternative.
Right.
And that made me not want to change my mind, really.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what platforms will Cactus be playable on?
It's coming out on the PC this year. So as you said earlier, it's on Steam with a demo, and you can grab the early access version for $15 as well. And we've got a DRM-free edition on Humble Store via our website. But just welcome to get either one if you're interested. Try the demo, and then next year.
That's on Windows, OS X, and Linux.
Yes, so just about any PC operating
That's-
system you can
Yeah,
imagine.
that's the modern definition of a PC nowadays, all three of those.
I guess. It doesn't run on Unix, I'm sorry. Anybody who's still using the Jurassic Park operating system.
Oh my gosh.
I know, that's a massive market we just killed.
Yeah.
Next year it'll be coming out on the Vita, PS4 and Wii U, and the Vita and PS4 version will be cross-buy, so you buy one of them, you get both of them.
How near is the game to completion?
As of taking time out to do this interview, not as near as it should have been. Relatively near. We're still hoping for an end of November-ish full release.
Awesome.
You can see that most of the levels are in the game in the early access build, but there's still like some of the bigger, more complex things like additional game modes, unlocks, and the rest of the bosses and stuff are yet to come into the game. So we'll be working hard on those.
Yeah, the game's in a pretty good state play-wise, and we're just really pushing in a lot of content at this point. And it's been difficult to estimate because we're hoping to wrap it up in the next month or two, but it's all about how quickly we can start getting those last parts of the levels in and new enemy types and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Will Cactus at any point have any add-on content or DLC in the future, or are you guys going to try to put it all in one game and just call it a day?
I think we're hoping to kind of revisit and expand things. We're not planning to do any expansion packs or paid DLC,
Right.
but I would really like to support the game.
My loose plan, and I don't know if Tim agrees with this plan. See, we don't actually talk through our plans all that much. We just kind of do things and then hope the other person deals with it. My loose plan is that we will release the PC version and then really focus on the console versions.
Gotcha.
But as we're developing those, there'll be downtime where kind of Tim's doing a lot of technical stuff, and maybe there's some content that I can be producing in the background. And if whatever new content we produce while we're working on those updates, bring that back to PC for free as enhanced edition essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we want to keep making content for the game, but we also have to focus on building the console versions, and we'd never want to end up in a position where one of the console versions has a bunch of extra content that the PC doesn't get. It all has to come back to the people who supported us, and make sure everyone gets everything.
That's the great thing about digital platforms as well, is that Steam makes it so easy to push out an update. It's almost transparent to the end user.
And the changes to the patching system for PlayStation and things now, where you don't have to pay for certification, is a kind of godsend, right?
Yeah. And what's likely to happen is, just like Nat was saying, that, for instance, the PS4 version, if we do any kind of graphical overhauls or improvements, would then backdate to the Steam version, and it's kind of they'll feed off each other, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. Upon stalking you guys on Twitter, because that's pretty much what I do when it comes to you guys, I'm stalking you on Twitter. I saw a conversation with you guys talking about trying to integrate gamepad controls for the Wii U version. So I'm gonna ask you now, how successful has that been going for you?
The gamepad works great. It's got 2 sticks and 2 triggers. So
I think she's talking about what we're going to do with the actual touchscreen.
Yeah. How you guys going to integrate the touchscreen to the game?
So for now, the plan is to just add some additional UI and extra information to the bottom screen. Because the game is so intense and utilizes the twin sticks so kind of thoroughly, there's very limited opportunity for us to actually make meaningful gameplay on the touchscreen with Cactus. But we're trying to come up with, because we'll have a couple months before, Wii U versions next year, so there'll be a while between the PC version and that version. We're trying to come up with concepts for maybe alternate bonus modes and things that really utilize the touchscreen. I wouldn't confirm or lock down on anything, but there's a bunch of ideas where counter-operative mode, someone's using the touchscreen to play asynchronous, not asynchronous, but multiplayer with the other people, and they're doing something on the touchscreen that affects the way they have to play. Not too sure yet. It's kind of a bit up in the air.
Right. Are you guys considering off-TV play and Miiverse integration at all for the game?
Oh, for sure.
Definitely off-screen. Yep, that's already kind of...
That is my favorite thing. about the Wii U.
Yeah, if you want to go on record with a controversial thought, I think the Miiverse is the most innovative thing about any of the upcoming consoles.
Right.
And I think that Microsoft and Sony will be implementing similar things at some point down the line with their network infrastructure because it's just so good.
Right. I love the Miiverse.
We're hoping to have some of the Miiverse stuff kind of nicely integrated between the levels and stuff. I really want to see people's immediate reaction after being defeated by Vespula, for instance. I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Oh, and there are some people on Miiverse that have beautiful, like, hand drawing skills, and I would just love to see if anybody would be able to draw Cactus or any of the other characters on the Miiverse. That would be really interesting to see.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, I've already run some competitions on Twitter to try and get people to draw Cactus and send them in. So totally looking forward to that.
Awesome.
And yeah, like I just love the way that the Miiverse stuff works actually. And like my favorite versions are New Super Mario Bros. U and Zelda, which just have fantastic integration. Where
definitely.
when you go through the levels in New Super Mario Bros., it picks out really interesting scenarios where if you failed the level a lot and you managed to beat it, or if you just ace the level, both of those are kind of outstanding moments where you might have something really useful to say to people like, oh, if you're dying a lot, try this, or hey, I just aced it and this is how.
Yes.
I just love the way it's contextualized and trying to push you to talk about things when you've done something interesting in the game, and I really want to take that back to Cactus as a concept.
Right. I think that they utilized Miiverse really, really well for that game as well. Considering how Nintendo was really restrictive on digital games in the past, how difficult was it for you guys to get Cactus onto the Wii U?
We filled out a form on their website, and that was it.
Really?
Well, we need to poke at them a little bit, but yeah, they've been so much. They've really been open and really been good about getting back to indies.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, and I would say the same of Microsoft. Sony. Sony have been just absolutely a pleasure to work with.
Right. And they're really pushing the whole indie thing, like really, really big this time.
Yeah, and it's really exciting for us to be able to put it on the two platforms like Vita and PS4 and do the cross-buy thing because, like on PC, when you buy it and you get a copy on Windows, OS X, and Linux all for the one price, right? You can play it on any operating system, any machine, anywhere. Now we can do that on PlayStation when we've got two versions up and running. You buy Cactus and then you have it on your kind of PlayStation universe, right? So I love that.
So for the Wii U version, will it feature asymmetrical play for the multiplayer? Like if somebody wants to play Cactus with a buddy, will it just be they would be using the TV, or would one person be able to use the gamepad and then the TV? How is that going to work out?
Well, it's a single screen co-op,
Gotcha.
so we can just make it work on the TV. I'm not sure there'd be really a point like separating it off of the gamepad, unless it was one of those extra modes like I was talking about, like alternate gameplay where it's not the standard co-op, but some kind of hybrid on that. Like I played a lot of Rayman Legends with the Murphy levels. I don't know if you've tried that at all.
Yes, I have.
I love that in co-op where you've got somebody else there. Maybe not by yourself; it's not so much fun.
Right.
But in co-op where someone's controlling, a Rayman character and running along and doing the platforming, and you are playing almost a completely different game on the touchpad where you're Murphy, you're tickling people, you're making pathways and things. And I'd love to do something like that on Cactus where you're playing with a bunch of people on regular control pads playing regular Cactus gameplay, and the gamepad person is doing something special.
Right. So next I'm going to start asking you questions related to PlayStation, since I know that this game is going to be coming to the PS4 and the Vita. But first I want to kind of go ahead and set the tone, kind of like what we discussed a little bit earlier. You made some very controversial statements about the PS4, and I just wanted you to go ahead and have this moment to kind of clarify your statement so that people could understand a little bit better as to what you were trying to say and where you were coming from.
Well, it's funny because the original statement that I made that was so controversial was about the power levels of the consoles, and I was talking purely technical, like stats when you write it down on a piece of paper. Which, if you write down the specs on any console, PC, whatever, on a piece of paper, you look at it, the PlayStation specs were higher. What else can I say? Who knows whether that translates to over 7 years, the thing with the most pretty games and the best games. I can't say for sure because that's predicting the future, right?
Right.
But that was all I was saying. And it was actually funny because in the context of the full interview, not the excerpt that they printed as a story or posted as a story originally, the previous question was asking really in-depth technical comparisons between whether I thought the GPU compute power of the PS4 would allow it to have prettier games in the long run than Xbox One. And my answer was actually, I don't think it's worth discussing this at this point because with our lack of experience, we're not qualified to be talking about which one's going to end up with the better looking things. So in context, a statement wasn't nearly as controversial as when they posted it completely out of context as a headline.
There was also a lot of the tone was that we're talking about the next generation of consoles, which are going to be more powerful than anything that's come before them by true progression.
Yeah, it was as much comparing the PS4 to the PS3 as anything else I was just talking about, because it's asked specifically about the PS4.
Gotcha.
And it's going to, it'll max out Cactus, from a specs perspective, it should max out Cactus pretty comfortably.
Right, that's great.
It was really interesting the way it was taken as well. Like some people took it as a saying that the line implied that that Knight had suggested that only the PS4 would be able to run Cactus at 60 frames per second, which is a really interesting interpretation of that line.
Especially since the end of the line was me specifying that even the Vita version will run at 60 frames a second. So I don't think anybody got to the end of the line.
We even managed to offend PC gamers, even though they're the only ones that can play the game right now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
In
that
retrospect.
was definitely a big deal, and I'm so happy that my writer, Jane, kind of brought that to the forefront. It needed to be said.
I was just going to say I thought it was fantastic that Jane was the only person who actually asked us to comment on the story.
Yes.
Like, I think 5 or 6 other websites picked it up and reposted it without, talking to us even.
Yeah, internally working on PR, that was the most interesting observation for me, was that nobody besides you guys and Jane, who's awesome, actually got in contact to try and find out more details about what that actually meant and what the context was.
Going back to the Vita version, will the Vita version have multiplayer as well? How do you guys plan on implementing the multiplayer for the Vita?
It's a good question at the moment, actually. We're still considering our options at this point. Obviously, we don't have a network play in place with Cactus yet. It's local co-op only, and we're still, because we haven't had as much hands-on dev time and stuff, we're still working out our options.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Yeah, I would say, just because I know that kind of sounds like a non-answer when we say we're still looking at our options, but it really is kind of true. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have multiplayer. That there's just as good a chance that it kind of will or won't, depending on how easy it is to look into these different things when we really start to put some time to it. So
that's a indie developer considering his options. I literally mean I need to spend more time with the API and figure out if that's going to make sense.
Right. So how do you guys plan on implementing the Vita's features with the game?
You mean like the back touch screen and
the touch screen in general? I know you guys kind of touched on some things that you guys kind of had in mind for the Wii U. Are you planning on kind of doing the same thing for the Vita version, or you want to kind of make it Vita specific?
Well, a lot of the Wii U concepts are born out of kind of asynchronous multiplayer game mode ideas and things. So if it depends on whether or not multiplayer is a real thing or a real possibility on the Vita version. If it is, it could be interesting to offer whatever touchscreen functionality we come up with. I'm not sure we'll go down the route of using second screen functionality on the PS4 to kind of try and match what you can do on the Wii U. But again, that's something we'd be interested in looking into because it's a unique Vita feature. I really like that kind of stuff too, the way they're using it.
Yeah, at the very least, we'll obviously support touchscreen menus and all that kind of interface.
I think one of the unique things about just watching how the guys have worked as indie developers, is that a lot of even like the fact that there's going to be a Vita version or Wii U version, it has a lot more to do with the fact that they both just like the Wii U and the Vita, and not as much to do with whether or not they're successful platforms out there in the world or not.
Right.
So in terms of what actually the game does on those platforms, will have a lot more to do with whether or not they actually like using them for that.
Right.
Like cross-buy, Cactus will have cross-buy because Sanatan and Tim love cross-buy and have used that, and have appreciated other games that have done that.
Oh yeah, I bought Sound Shapes and I got it for free on both platforms, and immediately I was like, oh, every game that's on both platforms should do this.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thing that Sony's doing. I'm glad that they're doing that. That's actually it would draw more people into getting a game, knowing that it has that feature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess that's Sham had a good point. I mean, I have a Vita. Well, Nat has a Vita. I like using my Vita, and a lot of the I suppose the interface and the way that Cactus works is going to be based on what I think is useful, what I find enjoyable. It's the version on Vita, I think, will be the game that I want to play.
Right.
I've got a Vita too, just to put that in there.
And a Wii U. We're all Vita Wii U people. It'd be funny if I'm like the only PS4 developer in the world who can't afford one this year, but we'll see.
My gosh.
But yeah, actually, what's interesting early on was we actually used to have Vitas as our like demo machines when we were going to local indie developer meetups and things. We would put videos of Cactus running on it and show it to people as our, hey, what do you think of our like crazy game? And universally, people would touch it and pick up the sticks and try and play it.
Right.
So,
I think that Cactus is going to play really, really well on the Vita. Well, since Cactus is already available to play on Steam. And I know you guys kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to come back to that and kind of let you guys expound on that a little bit. But will the console versions of Cactus have console-specific or extra content?
It's kind of one of those where it makes sense type of things. Like there might be things we do on the Wii U because it obviously the Miiverse integration, and if we can do something cute with the Miis, I would. Just because it'd be great, and so there might be some stuff that's on the consoles that isn't on Steam or vice versa, and it'll just kind of come down to what makes sense for each platform, basically.
Right.
And I would say that if any of the content is something that's just like additional game content and not something that specifically requires the console hardware or IP, it will be coming back to the PC version. So like there's extra characters that we've planned out and additional levels and game modes and things that we're not sure if we'll get time to actually make, but if we do end up making them and they appear in the console version, they come back to the PC version for free and things. Obviously, I'm not interested in kind of DLC at the moment. I've had too many bad experiences.
Well, how easy or hard was it to put Cactus on the new consoles compared to PC?
Well, I mean, the one we've had the most experience with the Wii U. First of all, like a lot of the others, it's the furthest along, and really we've been focusing on the PC version with an eye to keep going with the console versions for next year. But the Wii U has been, I would say it's definitely between PC development and mobile development. Which has been a pleasant surprise. They've made it really straightforward. It's a different system. It's not like you're just pushing a button, but it's been actually pretty smooth. And I'm kind of hoping we'll kind of keep that going.
Unity is by far the best multi-platform engine I have ever worked with. Although I've only ever worked with Sega's internal engines and some friends of mine's, but it's actually. I don't think it's ever been this easy to work on console versions and PC versions as a tiny developer.
Right. Is there any chance that Cactus could possibly come to the Xbox One?
I guess I should handle this one since, let's see, how can I not say something controversial? Or maybe I should. Controversial things. I'd say there's, right now, I never say never, but I would, I'd say no, there's not happening. I've Well, we originally talked to Microsoft before E3-ish, and the response was that they weren't interested in it because they had their Xbox Live Arcade system at the time.
Right.
And the only way that we could have got onto Xbox was to go and find a third-party publisher that we didn't need, give them a chunk of our game for doing nothing other than getting us a slot, and then pay lots of money to figure out how to develop it.
Right.
Then later on they were like, I'm sorry, we totally always planned to have self-publishing, but we just didn't tell you 2 months ago, so that changed everything. And then since then, I talked to a Microsoft representative at Eurogamer Expo, and they never got back to me. So basically, we're on 6 platforms and don't have time to mess about with people who aren't interested.
Right. Well, that pretty much concludes all of the questions that I have for you guys. Is there any important information that you guys would like to share with our readers and our viewers about Cactus?
Tim? Well, I'll briefly run down the boilerplate thing. It's a twin-stick shoot 'em up, so if you're interested in arcadey style games with bright colors and high frame rates, twitchy gameplay, check it out. 1 to 4 players in local co-op on PC, Vita, PC, PS4, and Wii U, and we'll see what happens on Vita, since there's no local co-op on a one control pad screen. And it's coming out about 2 months or a month and a half on PC, and then several months later, early next year, on consoles.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining me for this interview. I'm quite flattered, actually. But that concludes my video, and thanks everybody for coming out and watching or reading, if you're going to be reading this, from SheAttack.com. Don't forget to support SheAttack.com this October in our breast cancer awareness fundraising efforts, and I will see you guys at a later time. Thank you.
Cheers.
Guys,
Thanks very much.